the thread here as well, but brighter than his.
We've got people in New Zealand who were once described as the Waka Blondes, and these are people who have a different lineage than the Polynesian people. And I grew up with many of them. I knew many of them in my formative years, worked with them on work gangs. They were the people with red hair, freckled faces. They were distributed throughout New Zealand, and they were Maori, but they had come through a completely different lineage. And a lot of them actually have very traceable whakapapa that's much, much older than any of the Polynesian Maori whakapapa. And they know where they came from. I know one individual, an old kuia, a very dignified lady, who claims to come out of Persia. And the area that she's talking about, very close to India. And when we did DNA analysis on this lady, it shows a high incidence of her blood group or her DNA in the Persian area, so she's quite correct. But then the second big block, if you like, of people that share her DNA are found in Peru.
This is very interesting, as it concurs almost exactly with a Maori legend recorded over 100 years ago by ethnologist Elsden Best when he was living amongst the Tuhoi people. The legend tells us that their ancestors in times long passed away, 165 generations or around 3,500 years ago, migrated from a hot country named India. The cause of this exodus was a disastrous war with the dark-skinned folk in which great numbers were slain. This war was recorded in the Indian epic known as the Mahabharata. The legend continues on to describe their voyages which eventually took them into Polynesia. They crossed the oceans to Tawhiti Roa, a long skinny land believed to be Central America, and then on to Tawhiti Nui, a very large land, South America. And from there they ventured into the scattered isles of the Pacific. This Tuhoi story describes a very different history to the one that asserts that the Polynesians came from Taiwan, and it could even turn Pacific prehistory on its head. Perhaps it's time we track down the lady that Martin spoke of and got her story firsthand.
Gorgeous kids, eh?
We've always believed, from the history that was handed down by Piki Te Piki Kōtuku, our great-great-grandfather, that we came from this ancient place outside of Egypt, named ancient Persia. Today it is named Iran or Iran, whichever way you want to say it. Well, when I told my family, they were proud when I told them that they came from ancient Persia. Some of them said, "Oh, are we Arabs?" I said, "Well, actually, we'd be described as being Egyptian more than Arabs."
There they are. Hello.
This is only some of them. I got 64 together. Yeah, that's grandchildren, greats and great-greats. We're quite proud of it.
Oh gosh,
Oh, we really are. This is my mum. Her name was Tangi Maria Te Araroa Karauti. My mother was the one that gave me the history, and she wanted us to know just who we were and who we are. This is my dad, Hawani James Ham. His mother was a Waratini, and the Waratini are the blue-eyed Ngāti Hotu of Whakatane. This was my husband, Iki Whenua Mātāmua. He passed away in 2007. He is of Tuhoi descent, and they too are of Ngāti Hotu. I have here a photograph of my grandmother and my grandfather, Te Araroa Karauti. And my grandmother was red-headed, and she had the green eyes, and she was a very, very fair lady. This photograph is of Janet. Of my 10 children, she was the only one that really resembled me. And she is the only one of my 10 children that had the green eyes. But apart from that, a lot of my grandchildren do too.
We couldn't believe our eyes when we first saw Monica's family. Right in front of us was a living representation of the green-eyed, golden-haired people we've been looking for. They're not just fairy folk of the forest or mythical beings. They are real.